Everyone, and welcome on Tuesday, the 2nd of June, and we're going into a workshop on natural hazard portals. And to present this workshop is going to be Chris Cameron. So I'll hand it over to you, Chris.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for that. Yeah, good morning, councillors. Good morning, all who are listening in or watching today. So look, we're just going to run through quickly the presentation which went out with the agenda, I believe. So that'll just give us a quick overview and reminder of what it is we're covering today. I'm hopeful that councillors have had an opportunity to have a look over this and even to jump in and check out both the updated website and the Natural Hazards Maps portal, which is new and live since March this year. If we flick onto the next slide, please, Chris. So yeah, really that's the purpose, is to run through those things. As I say, I'm hoping people have had a chance to look at them and perhaps people online as well. If not, this will be an opportunity to really bring us up to speed. The links were provided there in this presentation, and we'll have a look through after we've finished with the PowerPoint here. We'll have a look through both the website and the portal maps, and we can zoom in and have a bit of an explore of various elements that you may be interested in as we go through that. So that's going to follow this this PowerPoint. Next slide, please. So this is the team that's been involved in this work. We've got Renee, who is in the room there. So Renee started with us in March also as a graduate, and she's been heavily involved in the geospatial work together with the GIS team, Alex and Yulia, who are listed there as well, who have been doing much of the translation and behind the scenes work to get it all up and running. Obviously, the portal approach is common amongst other regional councils in terms of providing online maps. And we are moving ourselves across to that in a number of different areas. So natural hazards has been the first cab off the rank, and we've also got other elements of information going through into that mapping portal approach as well, the likes of rating and property information, etc. And other things will be added over time. Next slide, please. So yeah, I've mentioned that already. Publicly released in March, and provides a really good level of access. And I think one of the things that we're finding or expect to find is that there'll be fewer direct public inquiries about some of these natural hazards as people get used to and are aware of the fact that we've got this online information that can be accessed directly. So these are the key elements that are covered in the portal. And if we flick to the next slide, what we've done at the same time is updated the website to provide improved information there. Again, we'll have a bit of a look at this shortly, but really what this does is provides an overview of what each of these hazards looks like, what it does, how they occur, what triggers them, those sorts of things. So very high level overview, and to support that, we've included the final tab there, understanding natural hazards, and that provides some of the background around things like what an annual recurrence interval is and some of the other terminology that's used in the hazard space. Next slide, please. So I think this is our final slide, a very short presentation here, but important to note that we started the Natural Hazards portal with a bunch of maps that were really the sort of select most up-to-date and most used maps. What we're doing is we're adding additional ones over time, and we'll continue to do that and maintain it and update it and improve on various elements as we go through. The second bullet point here is about some of the future updates that we're looking at. And in fact, we've just received updates for the Wanganui and Taramako rivers, as well as more up-to-date Waiho River flooding. So we'll show you those shortly as well. The Westport one mentioned there, so Westport modelling that exists in the portal at the moment is without the stop banks. Once the final stop bank design is agreed and approved, we'll be able to get the modelling rerun for that final design of stop banks, which will show the impact of stop banks reducing flooding for those 1 in 100 year events. I mentioned the finer scale landslide modelling. So the modelling we have in the portal right now, and councillors were presented with some of the detail of the landslide modelling late last year when that came through to us. So the landslide modelling we have right now is at a 25-metre grid scale. What we're doing is getting it down to an 8-metre grid scale, rerunning the modelling for smaller defined areas where we think the landslide hazard is greatest. So we haven't got that through yet. That's been done right now, but it will be able to be added to the portal once we get that too. Final point here around tsunami modelling. So there's a requirement under the new legislation for councils to have a single blue zone rather than 3 existing zones that are used. And so we'll be working our way through that over coming months as well to update that. Okay, well, I think we're going to shift now to Renee, perhaps. So if Renee's able to share her screen, then we'll take a look first at the updated website and how to navigate through from that into the portal itself. Any questions? Happy to take questions as we go through, or if there's anything that crops up for you from what I've talked about so far.
I've got one question, Chris.
Yeah.
Just on slide where it's got the coastal landslide, earthquake, flooding, tsunami risk on the west coast with historic information that you've got. What is the risk factor on tsunamis?
Yeah, there's been some research done on that. I think it stretches back to 2014 from memory, and it shows that there is significant tsunami risk up and down the coast. So there's historical record of past tsunamis, and typically that can be at a height of 6 to 8 meters along the coast. So yeah, not at all insignificant. And we can look at that a little bit further in the website information where we explore somewhat the variety of tsunami impacts that we can have from sort of near shore ones. So we've got the Foulwind fault lies not far offshore from the west coast. If that ruptures, that may cause a near shore tsunami, which doesn't give us much warning time. And at the other end of the scale, there's there's the Eastern Pacific tsunamis, for example, that might come from Chile and wrap their way around New Zealand and reach the west coast also. So that's sort of the extent of that they can be 12 to 14 hours, those Eastern Pacific ones, to perhaps minutes to half an hour sort of area for the near shore ones.
Thanks. So it's a real risk.
A real risk, absolutely. Yep.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, so look, sorry, just wondering if there's any other questions there before I move on.
No, we're all good, Chris. Thanks.
Okay, great. So look, here we are on the website. If we go into the natural hazards area, so it's a bit tricky to navigate to currently. So it's under land, which sits under environment, and then natural hazards is down the bottom there. So I think we're a little bit limited at this stage in terms of giving it a higher profile on the website and the way in which our architecture of our website works. So we're just having to live with that currently. If we jump into the tsunami one, Renee, to start with, so that will give us some of that sort of background on that question that you were asking there. So that talks about, and that map was something that we produced for the website over the summer, which shows those sort of regional source or closer source tsunamis. You can see they're the ones that less than an hour it talks about with the West Coast fault lines. But then the 3 hours plus in terms of what might come down through from the Pacific north of New Zealand. Local source less than 1 hour. And so, as I said, this is really providing some background information around each of the hazards, how they occur, what causes them. Really good sort of public level information for people to access and find out a little bit more about what that hazard is and what it means for the West Coast. So we've borrowed some of these images from elsewhere, and I think they're quite good in terms of giving you that general background. Lake tsunami or seiches, and I guess they're sort of two related, but can be different things as well, is really shown by that that AI image, which is around a landslide coming down into a lake and causing a lake tsunami. What happens in a lake environment is that they can bounce around off the banks and carry on for some time and cause issues that way. So they're a real hazard for our region, hence the discussion on them here. Links to reports. So typically each of the web pages has a similar format and some links to some of the related reports or the information that sort of backs up what we've seen on the West Coast or that general information around the hazard. So yeah, feel free to go and explore that further at your leisure, and that might answer some of those questions around the tsunami risk. If we go in and look at one of the other ones, perhaps river flooding, Renee, jump into that. Obviously, the most common hazard that we see on the West Coast. What is it? What causes it? Why do we see that flooding? And then carrying on down to what those impacts are. We've got a link there to the New Zealand Flood Hazard Viewer. So that's based on work done by NIWA, which came out late last year also. They did effectively a sort of a first cut of a national flood model. It's still not national because they look at flooding on main floodplains rather than further up catchments. And it's a very coarse resolution because it's that national scale. But it's been useful. We've been using it for areas that we don't have regional modeling for. So for example, we have detailed modeling for most of the urban areas on the West Coast and their immediate catchments, but not for smaller catchments or lower populated areas. And we'll see that when we jump into the portal as well. So one thing we've been doing there is using that national flood modeling to identify where flood hazard might be an issue, and again we commonly know where those issues are, but to support us in terms of where we should potentially carry out some more detailed modeling at that finer regional scale when we don't have it now. Talk a little bit about stop banks infrastructure and the rating districts there, the monitoring process and the work that's undertaken by our hydrology teams in terms of both rainfall and river flows. A little bit there about some of the terminology, the AEPs and ARIs, etc. And then we're also trying to link these in through to some of the get ready type stuff, the emergency management side of things. So there's some links or information around those sorts of things that we've included here too. Not sure if there's anything more on that page. No, we're going back. Let's go to coastal.
Just one thing before we go from there, Chris.
Yeah.
You know how the long, strong get gone philosophy is really, embedded in everybody. Well, I think sometimes we need to have another wee look at that, because in certain cases, long, strong get gone. And when it applies to, say, primary schools, is not really the best advice for some schools that are quite a wee way away from coastal areas. And so long, strong get gone, the attitude is get out of the class and get up to high ground away from the sea coast. Sometimes I think that is not the most suitable advice, because at the stage that you get a long, strong, get gone type of a scenario, you could have a whole heap of kids heading up a busy street where people are not really thinking as clearly as they might, and actually, I think in some respects, putting children in more danger than the actual, in reality, the water coming all the way from, I only speaking from a typical example in Westport, for example, probably talking a K, 2K from the seacoast before it gets there. But you could actually be, that philosophy may not be always applicable.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think there's some nuance around that, and if you're not in the tsunami zone, then you don't need to get gone. You're already outside of that zone.
You already are gone, in my opinion.
In that sense. So a couple of things there, I suppose. One is that part of the issue there is that even if you are in the tsunami zone, heading up into the hills when there's been a major earthquake and there's likely to be landslides induced by that, you need to be quite cautious about which hills you choose to go up.
Yeah.
And that landslide risk is a real thing, and particularly in a place like Greymouth. So I think we do need to improve some of the information and understanding around those sorts of things.
I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to tailor make it for some schools anyway.
Yeah,
because,
absolutely. Yep. And so Enviro schools, our commitment to that recently may be an approach we can use to enhance that information for specific locations. The other thing we're doing is we've started to develop some sort of basic information pamphlets around different hazards. So Renee's been working on those, and we've got a couple of draft versions for landslide hazard and for flood hazards. And really it's providing that sort of basic understanding of what the hazard is, taking some of what we've got here on the website and combining it with some of that emergency evacuation type of information as well. So really just a bit of a resource to be able to go out to those communities with, to have something that they can take away from an event, or if we go and visit schools, for example, we can provide those sorts of things. So the emergency management teams have been starting to take a look at that and provide input. So we're working our way through to getting something together in that space. The other thing I just mentioned is around that sort of multiple hazard perspective. So multiple and cascading hazards. We talk a little bit about those in that general information tab that we'll get to shortly. But that's a real concern around those types of events, like an earthquake that can cause liquefaction.
Hazards.
Yeah, liquefaction, tsunami, landslide, multiple hazards can come at once, and so these don't exist in isolation from one another. And I think that's something that we need to, both improve our communication on, but also our understanding of what those might mean and how that could play out. And perhaps again, it's some scenarios about how those things might impact on one another and what that might mean for people.
Thanks for that, Chris. We've got another probably 7 minutes on this, so we'll. 10 o'clock. Oh, 10 o'clock, is it? I thought it was 10.
Did we have till 10? Is that right?
Yeah. 10, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
Can I just make a comment at this point? Thanks, Chris. So the purpose of today is to tell you about the portal and the underlying natural hazard information. When it comes to what we do about this information, particularly with ready to respond, etc., you're absolutely right. That's a civil defence matter with Claire Brown and her team, and specifically in terms of tsunamis. with the change in legislation requiring all of New Zealand to go to that one zone rather than multiple zones, that's going to have to be worked out for the West Coast and then the evacuation arrangements. But what I'd say, and I'll just use the example you've touched on with schools, and I've heard this discussion before. I completely understand what you're getting at with Westport and the issues there. But if you go to the school, which is just across the road and down a bit, those kids can get up the hill quite readily. So the evacuation plans that need to be developed in relation to natural hazards, tsunami, flooding, or whatever it might be, earthquake, are really the auspice of the district councils, right, dealing with their own communities inside their own districts. Okay, and it's their role to partner up with the schools or wherever it is to actually work up those sorts of plans. Of course, that's aided and assisted and often led by the people that we pay and ration or pay for, which is the emergency management officers, which we embed into the districts. Okay, but it's district led, that stuff, eh? And what I'd say, just to reiterate, is I think there's a horses for courses in each individual setting, particularly in terms of the schools. Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks, Daryl. Yeah, that's really good context.
Chris,
Okay.
I'll just make one comment as well. So Chris is guiding me through what we currently have in terms of our natural hazard information. As you're aware, it's the requirement of regional council to provide this. As we're going into long-term plan, it'd be really useful if councils could just look at this and have a think about, are we providing the right information to our communities? Do you think there's any gaps in this information? Do you think certain natural hazards should be prioritised over others? And providing general feedback during the workshop on that as opposed to the technical side of things, that would be really helpful for us in a long-term plan.
Great.
Over to you,
Thank
Chris.
Back to you, Chris.
Thank you. Okay, so look, we're looking at the coastal inundation aspects here, coastal inundation and erosion. Obviously, again, quite a considerable issue for parts of the West Coast. Both the erosion of coastal assets or natural environments, as well as the flooding aspects that we talk about here. These are included in the TTPP with a sea level rise aspect. You may be well familiar with that. So we've got those zones mapped in the natural hazards portal as well. So there's really a little bit of discussion here around those risks on the West Coast and the climate change induced changes as well. Storm surge, obviously, another impact. So those low pressure storms where sea levels are higher than normal, and that storm surge pushes further inland, as well as the impact of waves. So again, there's some sort of general aspects of those changes induced by climate change with sea level rise, but also higher intensity storms, potentially changes in the direction that storms are coming from, also induced by climate change, can be quite significant. So again, some links to relevant reports on that.
Look, I might just make a comment. Chris, you'd be aware the United Nations started back down on the climate change predictions, but it's going to take a wee while for that to filter through. I see our papers are still full of it.
Yeah, so the modelling has shifted away from the highest scenario in terms of it not being plausible any longer, and I think that's fair. It's basically it was a scenario that kept on continuing to increase in pace, and we haven't followed that, partly I think due to COVID and so on. Emissions haven't continued to rise at that pace. So yeah, it's a good thing, and I guess we'll wait to see whether that translates into any national guidance or policy as to whether we should look at anything different. I guess my own view is that so what we're talking about there is the RCP 8.5 scenario, which is about an additional 8.5 watts per square meter of warming across the globe on average. From what I can see in the new scenarios, it looks like we may get to that 8.5 square meters watts per square meter by 2150 instead of 2100. So it's really just about the timing. We're still going to get there. It's just going to take a little bit longer.
Again, I'll make a comment here. It probably is no surprise to councillors that the United Nations has not cancelled climate change. They're still saying that climate change is happening and is a real thing. That's what they say. What they are withdrawing from at a United Nations level is the most severest prediction of climate change at the most extreme scenario. What the whole of New Zealand is going through at the moment is how is that most extreme scenario embedded in law or in guidance or in the natural hazard assessments, particularly in terms of coastal, and what do we need to do about that? So that's still, as you say, got to come. But yeah, all they're doing is they're withdrawing the most extreme scenario that they've been advocating for.
Daryl, this is the biggest fraud in the history of human nature, human civilization. This climate change stuff is the biggest fraud. It's absolute nonsense. Man has got no effect on the environment. There's too many other factors out there. We've got a big nuclear reactor in the sky which determines the Earth's temperature, not man.
Thanks,
Thank
Councillor.
you. That's no surprise. Okay, carry on.
Just adding, Daryl, to what you said there, I think a key thing to recall is that we have coastal we have climate change built into the coastal mapping in the TTPP, so that's up to a metre of sea level rise, but we don't have any climate change impacts built into our flood modelling at this stage, or not, at least not into the flood modelling that's shown on the portal or in the TTPP. So that's something that you know we'll be looking at, and partly in terms of this change to the scenarios, we'll be looking at whether and which particular scenarios we need to include in the future around changes in flooding. Okay, so let's look at the landslide one there, Renee, if you don't mind. Again, this is talking about the regional work that's been done to provide region-wide landslide modelling. And it provides the sort of the inundation or the likelihood of property damage. So based on the depth of landslide that might run through a particular location. And so this is some relatively novel modelling approach that's been undertaken for us. And we're the first region in the country to get it. So if we just scroll down there, again, this is all around some of the background about landslides and what causes them. The main triggers there being intense rainfall as well as earthquakes. Different types of landslides, so you know, debris flows, rock, etc. Again, we talk about things like landslide dams, so a kind of a secondary hazard that can form from a landslide blocking a river, a lake forming behind that, and then that can burst in the future. Carrying on down, some of the major landslides that have occurred on the West Coast. Yeah, I guess a key thing around again that kind of cascading and multiple hazards aspect to remember is around the impact of alpine fault rupture will be a whole lot more material coming out of the hills, which will be increasing the rates of aggradation of many of our rivers over time as well. So that's something to bear in mind. A bit of information about what to do and how to be prepared for landslides. So same sort of information there. Okay, so if we go back, I think we've got a couple more there. So the earthquake one is including both fault rupture as well as that tsunami. If we can jump into earthquakes. Oh no, we've talked about tsunami on the other one, sorry. talking about fault lines and the AF8, and obviously AF8's been a very influential piece of research work which has come out to communities and discussed the risk of alpine fault rupture, the significant risks. But we also allude here to other fault lines on the West Coast which may equally cause a significant amount of damage if they were to rupture. Offshore faults, so coming back to that question around tsunami, the location of those offshore faults which could cause that local tsunami are covered in that map. Liquefaction, so obviously an issue that gained a lot more attention following the Christchurch earthquakes. The GNS, or now Earth Sciences New Zealand, have come out with a national liquefaction model. It was just released in the last couple of weeks. And so they've got their own national level portal, which provides that liquefaction mapping for the entire country. So again, if you're interested, you'll be able to access that. What we'll look to do is to put a link through on our portal to that national information, so that you can check that out if you're interested, and for those that want to see what that looks like compared to other modelling that we have. A little bit of the history around earthquakes on the West Coast here, primarily Murchison, the types of damage that were caused back then. And then 1968, some other major damage caused by earthquakes. Quite interesting to see some of those historical images and the sorts of things that occurred back then. Okay, so if we go back and we've got the final tab here is the understanding natural hazards, as I mentioned earlier. Really some of that sort of key terminology around hazard, risk, consequences, exposure, etc. What those things mean, and trying to provide some of that context for the layperson who may not be familiar with these things. Residual risk is a big one, and really, I guess, in terms of the likes of our stop bank protection for rivers, what does it mean in terms of if a flood event occurs that exceeds the design of those stop banks? What does that look like? And starting to kind of expose people to that sense of it offers a level of protection, but not complete protection against every eventuality. So some other aspects there, I won't go into all of these. Cumulative and cascading hazards, so we've touched on that, what the difference is between the sort of cumulative and the cascading, and the effects that can emerge out of that. Obviously, we don't have the direct volcano effect there, but that's the example that we've pulled into this one. And cascading hazards there too. Okay, so if we go back up and jump into the portal now, so again, it's available from this page, and I think from the front page of the website too. So here again, we have a bunch of different tabs, and perhaps if we look at the river flooding first, so you can see down the left-hand side there's the main centres, or the main locations where we have flood modelling. So if you click on one of those, and perhaps Greymouth, yep, we can actually, it zooms into that location and shows that 1 in 100 year flood risk for that particular location. So as I mentioned earlier, this is where we have the flood modelling that has been run, and we've put that directly into here with that 1 in 100 year event. So that's showing the flood depth in the different shades of blue based on that type of event. What we have for a couple of locations is these breach scenarios. So what that does is where we've got modelling which shows locations where if there was a breach in the stop bank, it shows where that flooding would occur. So, for example, for Greymouth here, we've got a breach coming out down in that Blaketown area. You can see there where that red line is. That's where the water would sort of escape through and potentially flood some of that area. So this is the modelling that we've had done for a number of different locations. You can see it flicks through to an example in Cobden there, breach up that way, and I think the third one's up and further downstream up in Cobden as well. So if we go back to, sorry, we have breaches for Hokitika as well as the other location. So we might want to just have a quick look at that. Sorry, Renee, I think you were just about to jump into that. So again, we have 3 breach scenarios for Hokitika, which run in a similar way and just show where that water would flow through in the depth in those different scenarios. There's not too much difference between some of them. So if we go back into the main flooding one, so we have again, if we jump down to the Waiho and have a look at that. So this is currently the modelling that we have in here is from 2021, and we've just received through, as I mentioned earlier, we've just received through the updated 2024 flood modelling. So you can see there much of the flow in that flood event is going down to the south of the Waiho Loop. What's happened obviously since with the avulsion is that it's going through the Tātere Gorge much more. So Renee, I don't know if you've got that other new map in there. So there we go. Yep. So you can see here, this is the 2024 modelling. It shows the avulsion and the impact on Lake Pratt, with much of that flow now going through the Tātere Gorge. So we've just received this literally today. To check over before that gets updated and included into the natural hazards portal there. So what we're looking at is the sort of hot off the press based on the modelling that was done in 2024, but we only included the 2021 modelling previously in the portal. Okay, so that's our river hazards. And if we just sort of scroll perhaps on the left-hand side there again, I think there's a link again to further down to the national flood model. Yep, there it is. So again, for those areas, and if we zoom out on this map, you can see how patchy it is really in terms of we have those main catchments, but not the bits in between. Looking at the National Flood Tool, and we won't go into it today, but it fills in many of those gaps and provides at least a starting point for where flooding would affect those different catchments. Okay, jumping in across into the landslide hazards.
Sorry, Chris, can I just ask this question? And it may be there, but obviously where we've got fully calibrated, verified flood models that are, been through all that rigor, obviously they are the sources of truth that people should use and not the generalized national map. But for areas where we don't have our calibrated, verified models, the national map is the best we've got. Does the advice on the website reflect that to users?
It probably doesn't as well as it could actually, Daryl. That's a really good point. So we can update that. I think that's perhaps something that we've assumed without stating it to that degree. So
you're going to have to, because we don't want to be played off by saying, oh, this other map shows that we're not flooded, and this, and they choose, which one, so. The order of hierarchy is we use our calibrated, verified models, and that's what our position is from a flood hazard perspective. And it's only when we don't have information that we default back to the national one.
Excellent.
Can I just, Chris, the national flood map, from my understanding, wasn't done to property level, so it couldn't be used anyway. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, that's right. It's not done to property level. It's not suitable for use at that level. But nonetheless, I think people tend to, zoom in as far as they can and try and use it for that reasoned.
Okay, so in those situations, and thanks, Shanti, that's a really good point. The narrative words that are on the website surrounding this information is very important, and can we have a look at that? Thanks. I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Daryl.
The other point for council is just to note, in terms of gaps, is that National Flood Model didn't cover some really important inland areas, like Reefton is completely missing. So we still don't have any options for Reefton, but that's why we're prioritising it for mapping next financial year.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Shanti. No, that's a really good point. And I guess just to comment on that flooding too, before we move on to this landslide one, is that you'll be aware that the government's putting some effort into a national flood model. So that's another step further again. And there's a number of phases involved in that approach. What they've done to start with is they've taken they've done an assessment of what flood modelling does exist within regions, and therefore where gaps exist to be filled, but also they've taken that data that we have for flood modelling for each of those localized areas that we just looked at. So what they're doing initially there is looking to combine all of the modelling that exists around the country into one maps portal effectively. So that's existing modelling. An issue with that is that each council may have their own approaches or their own frequency of flood events, those sorts of things that differ from one another. So comparability between regions could be a challenge. As I understand it, what they're looking to then do is to replicate the modelling and perhaps work towards a best practice model or modelling approach that can be used across the country. That's a much more complicated piece of work for them to get to that. So it'll be interesting to see how that does evolve. I mean, really, the sort of the bottom line is that regions have the best flood modelling available. It's very difficult to replicate that nationally unless you put a lot of computing power and a lot of effort into ensuring there's consistent modelling with a single approach across the country.
Chris, I've got a question there. Like the flood modelling for slow-moving rivers probably quite easy, but flood modelling some of our southwestern rivers that are travelling like 25 kilometres an hour, and it all depends on the direction of the flow of the river of what it will do. And you might model that it's going to go over here, but if that runs a different direction, and I'm talking to a man here is nodding his head because he knows exactly what we're talking about.
Range is a classic example, isn't it?
Yep. And if it hits the bank in a certain direction, it'll take it out, and you might model it, it's going to flood there, but it won't be. It'll be where it's hitting the bloody bank. So, you know, that the modelling for our rivers is totally different to the national modelling, I would say.
If we move towards national modelling, that's right. Yeah, and I think that's part of the complexity of it, right? That we do have characteristics and flow and steep, shorter catchments than other parts of the country. So, yeah, as I say, I think it's going to be very challenging to develop this national flood modelling and seek that consistency that they might be working towards. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to be a quick and easy task for them. Okay, so moving on to sorry.
One question, Chris.
Sorry.
I think you probably need to caveat the national model ones, because really, in a way, they're almost useless, because if you can't use them for predicting or making plans, then, you know, because they're too coarse, then in a way they're just giving people a false sense of security, really.
Yeah, I think what we've been looking at is not at the property level, but more at the catchment level, and going, okay, if there's a indication that there's flood risk in those areas, then we should explore that more and look at as to whether we need to do some additional localized modelling in those places to give us a better steer on what that might look like. So yeah, it's not to that property level, but more for guidance around flood risks and how to appropriately manage them and get an understanding at least of where they might exist, and we don't have good information. Okay.
Yeah.
There's one more question here.
Up in the North Island, one of the councils got challenged on their flood modelling And it took it from thousands of properties affected down to about 12. So how accurate is the flood modelling anyway? And I know the TTP is not accurate. They've just taken a strip of land along the coastline without really studying it. So that's not correct either. So really, have we got an accurate flood modelling plan?
I think the regional scale flood modelling is really good. I mean, we use Land River Sea for the majority of our modelling, and you know, those are experts in that field. So yeah, like I think we can place a lot of confidence in the regional modelling that we do have. The coastal is another matter, and you know, a lot of that's based on coarser scale modelling, which may just be based on land surface elevation and those sorts of things. I'm not sure whether it's incorporating the latest LiDAR data, for example. So there is some scope potentially for improvement in those ones.
Definitely in the TPP. I think they just did it from aerial photographs. It may be more accurate now, I don't know. But initially it was just a strip of ground along the coastline. And it took in bluffs that are 50 metres above the sea and everything.
We could
So whether they've improved it, I don't
have
know.
a look at that one now. We've probably only got time for one more. So maybe if we go to Chris.
Okay, thanks, Shanti. Look, landslide hazards here. Oh, sorry. Landslide hazards. So we demonstrated this to councillors when it first came out. It's since been updated with the latest LiDAR that I mentioned. So LiDAR that was completed across the region last year. So this modelling has the LiDAR data as its base, whereas previously we were using satellite surface elevations. So it's improved on what we initially had in the portal. And as I said earlier, what we're looking to do is to based on a number of hotspots, provide perhaps 4 or 5 locations that we can zoom in on, a bit like we have with the flood modelling. On the left-hand side, you'll be able to click on that area and zoom into the finer scale modelling for those areas. So that's what we can expect to come through in the next several months. At this stage, it's that quite coarse regional scale modelling, and what we've said with this is that there's that caveat around its use. It's not suitable for use at the property level. It's really a broader scale regional indication. So sorry, we're going to jump to coastal, Shanti, I think was that?
Yeah, so we've probably got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah.
Okay, so again, this is what we looked at briefly in the website, was both the impacts of coastal inundation and erosion. And you can see those tabs in green across the top there. We're looking at the moment at the coastal inundation risk. Better basis in terms of LiDAR information would have been used for these in the main centres, as opposed to outside the main centres along the coast. So you can see that there that we've zoomed in for Westport. If we look at the coastal erosion projections, that's the other tab across the top there. Again, showing some zones and some quite coarse zones outside of the main centres again that are exposed to the risk of coastal erosion. Conscious of time, so I won't go into too much detail on this one.
Hey?
Punakaiki, is it?
Is it?
Punakaiki we're looking at here.
Is that if the sea rises 1 metre? Chris, is it?
Yeah, correct. So again, down the left-hand side there, the text will provide that in terms of what we're
Does it
talking about.
include land rising as well or not?
No, this doesn't. So it's just about the projected sea level rise. And it's also based on that historic information around where erosion has been seen in the past.
Yep.
So just jumping to the reports tab on the final one there, we have a list of the various reports that are referred to under each of the other tabs. So there's links through there, it's just popped up on the left-hand side. And the map shows the area covered by those reports. So obviously we have specialist natural hazard reports on particular hazards that have been done for just a subset of the region, not for the entire region, while others have been done across the region and apply across the entire region. So that's sort of providing that spatial sense of what that technical reporting can be applied to.
Thanks, Chris. Is there any other further questions?
So just to summarise, at the end, if councillors have any comments or questions later on, we're happy to take them. Feel free to have a look at the website and explore a bit further. But what we're really keen is councillors to set direction and moving forward and make sure, you know, that we are focusing on the right risks for our communities. You're in touch with our communities, you know what's really important. And so getting feedback on that from you would really help.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks very much, Chris.
Okay, thank you all.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers. All right, thanks, councillors. Just a few minutes break. If you want to get another cup of tea, a cup of coffee,